Hello, my name is Jeff Rolka. I want to thank you for checking out my video. This is questions from comments number 17. I do so enjoy questions from comments. It's super fun and I don't know, I enjoy answering questions. So it's really fun. Anyways, this was a really cool question that came in. I suspect that many of us might ask this question. And so without further ado, allow me to read you the question. How do I know if I am a tenor or a baritone? I could probably stop right there, but there's a little bit more background information I want to briefly address before I show you how to do that. I am trying to figure out where I should be starting my mixed voice, something I haven't really found yet. I can belt out E's and on some vowels F. Belting out the high note is not the way to figure out what your vocal range designation is. From there on up, my head voice is airy and wispy, as it would be. If I start my mix around C, which is almost certainly too low, I can make a somewhat smooth transition, but it is weak and subject to cracking. That too would be expected. When you get that cracking, it's because there's an imbalance. And what you're reporting here, this person is reporting here about the head voice being airy and wispy, that's kind of like a sustained crack. Because what you have is the vocal folds separating, or they're partially abducted, partially separated. And that is the configuration that the vocal folds adopt in falsetto tone production. But if they're only just around E's and F's above middle C, then that range that's immediately above that, that's too low for that profile to have a full sound. When we're here on C's and D5s up there, that's when that partial abduction results in a full sound to the voice, which you can hear in like some of the falsetto training videos that I have on the channel. But in any case, let's get down to it here. Additionally, it's worth mentioning, before I do that, this person has indicated belting some notes out around E's and F's. I can belt out E's and on some vowels F. Inconsistencies, like it's only some vowel, is not a sustainable kind of phonation. You're going to have to be able to do this on any number of different vowels that you might encounter in the language or languages that you sing in. So only some vowels is an indication that something's not working quite as well as it could. It could be a vowel formation thing, it could be an airflow thing, it could be a vocal coordination thing. All of those things are something that you have to explore. But when you've belted in the past, or you've gotten to that high note and then it kind of busts open, and you get that airy sound, those are habits that you're going to have to circumvent. But I would suggest to you that the three things I'm going to show you will help you do just that. So 3 things that can help you figure out whether or not you are a baritone or a tenor. Step 1, which is a 2-part step, align your vowels and adopt an appoggio breath management practice in the thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice. That is your chest voice, and the comfortable area is where I begin. So you might start somewhere like around here, working towards all of these vowels should be about the same volume. They should have similar or resonances that are the same, and the intonation should be reliably consistent. If you get one vowel or 2 vowels that are not matching the others, those need to be aligned. That practice of alignment will help you to have the precision in the zona de passaggio so that you can do vowel modifications that are just right as opposed to being too much or too little to have well-balanced phonation. Now, the next 2 parts to figure out whether you are a baritone or a tenor, they kind of happen, they sort of coincide in my teaching. So when I'm working with the vocalist who is working towards determining their FOC, or their vocal range designation, what we're also working on here is accessing the upper register of their voice, ultimately in the practice of voce piena in testa, the sound of head voice, the sound of chest voice in head, not the sound of head voice in chest. The sound of chest voice in head. So these two parts, you're going to probably end up going back and forth between the two a little bit. The first one is practicing your vowel modifications, ever so slightly increasing towards what you think your secondo passaggio might be. Now, whether you are a baritone or a tenor, so we don't know this yet, whether you're a baritone or tenor, it is most likely that your secondo passaggio is going to be somewhere between D sharp and F sharp. That minor third is where most of us will find our secondo passaggios. Anything above that or anything below it are much less common than that minor third of space. So what we're going to do is we're going to practice our vowel modifications approaching that minor third. And here's the trick. We start high and then descend from there. Me, 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 me. Me, 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 me. Okay, that worked out really well. Let's try a half step higher. Me, 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 me. Me, 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 me. Me, 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 me. That too worked really well. Let's go a semitone higher still. Me, 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 me. Me, 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 me. That also worked out well, and we would keep on doing that. Why am I not just ascending towards the D sharp, F sharp area? Because I want to give the vocal fold the maximum opportunity to adopt its most efficient profile. This is particularly important if you have belted in the past or you've allowed your vocal folds to slide off into that separated falsetto tone production that we can sometimes do. If you've done either of those things in the past, start at the higher point and work your way down, but start at the bottom of what would be the zona de passaggio. So that might be as low as that B flat. You might start these practices there. Me, 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 me. Me, 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 me. You only need to go a semitone or two down when you're that low. As you get closer and closer to D sharp and E natural, then you might go all the way out. So take those exercises all the way down and out of the zona de passaggio and then try them again. As you get closer and closer to that D sharp E natural area, you have to really consider carefully how you are modifying your vowels, the engagement or support that you are applying, and how the vowels are balancing out. It is quite likely that there will be some fluctuations in the balance. So as you get into that A major area where you're starting on an E natural, you might on one day find that it's really heady, but it doesn't sound right and it feels a bit funny. That's too much modification, far too cricothyroid dominant. That seems better. And then the next day you try it again. Experiment with it. You're going to have to experiment with it or with your teacher. Work through those areas. You might also record yourself and listen back to it. Start with that vowel in those short syllables, working your way down. At the same time, we need to establish that we can make the transition across the secondo passaggio effectively and consistently. One might argue that effectively kind of implies consistently, but let's just get it all out there, right? We want to be effective, we want it to be consistent. And we're talking like a really high level of consistency here. Like you won't miss it out of 10, you won't miss it out of 100. It's an easy, obvious exercise once you've established accessing the upper register of your voice. You. For those of us who have belted or used a falsetto tone production in that range of our voice in the past, that can prove challenging. You. top note is very clearly heady sounding. I am doing that on purpose, and I would advise you to do the same. This ensures that you are accessing the cricothyroid dominant singing voice. Your vocal folds are elongated because you are allowing the cricothyroid muscles to elongate the vocal fold. When you hear about like laryngeal tilt, you hear about thinning the vocal fold. That's what's happening. The cricothyroid muscles are pulling on the hyoid cartilage and they're rotating it, and it elongates the vocal fold. And in that configuration, the vocal folds can remain adducted while being elongated. And eventually, it will connect across. And I'll show you that in a minute or two here. So we practice this. And just like the other exercise, we're going to descend. But we're going to listen this time for where that top note, and that top note, we always want the top note to be in that cricothyroid dominant singing voice, commonly thought of as the head voice, over the break, if you like. That pitch, we want it to always be in the cricothyroid dominant singing voice. And if it ever gets where it's too low and it feels weird or strained and it's not quite right, and I'll show you what that sounds like, then we know we've gone too far with it. Go back up. So here, you, 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 you. You can hear I can't really sustain that here on the D natural. I've come too far with my head voice on that top pitch. That's too low for a balanced transition from my thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice, my chest voice, to my cricothyroid dominant singing voice, my head voice. And when you do this practice over and over again, what you will find is that eventually these two exercises will meet at a point. That point is your secondo passaggio, and that point will tell you whether you are a baritone or a tenor. So if you find you, 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 right in there. That's where my secondo passaggio is. Some days it feels like it's F sharp. It never really feels like it's F, but it's kind of right tucked in that space. I don't really think it adheres to Western tonal music. It really feels like it's in between the two. That's my secondo passaggio. By learning where that point is, I can now make the incremental changes through my zona di passaggio, the area that's right below it, so that I have a balanced transition from my thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice to my cricothyroid dominant singing voice. This facilitates what is called voce piena in testa, the sound of chest voice in head. And I'm going to have, it's not water, it's tea, but because I've been talking so much, I'll have a little sip of that before I show you. When we make incremental changes below the secondo passaggio, it allows us to seamlessly allow for the elongation and contraction, because the vocal folds are elongating and contracting as I go through all those scales. It elongates as we make our way towards the secondo passaggio, and it stays adducted or closed as I cross the secondo passaggio, and the secondo passaggio is called the break very frequently. And it's that adduction that gives us the full sound. If I maybe hadn't practiced as much, or if I was having like a really bad day or I were sick, it might sound a bit different. Starting here in B flat major, so I'm getting really close to my secondo passaggio. If I hadn't practiced or I was sick, you can hear how it gets kind of cloudy at the tops of those scales. I am overbalancing my voice towards my head voice to show you where that transition is. If I really hadn't practiced this or I hadn't had any training, it's quite likely that my vocal folds will slip off. And there you can hear that when I get to my secondo passaggio, the vocal folds are separating and it gets very airy. I lose a ton of volume, and then I'm able to readduct it as I come back down. Frequently in an untrained vocalist, they won't be able to reconfigure the vocal fold as they come back down across the secondo passaggio. It'll just stay open like that. But if you want to know whether you're a baritone or a tenor, those are the steps that I would advise you to take. In truth, over time, your vocal range designation, your FOC, will reveal itself to you with that practice. And quite frankly, that practice is in and of itself its own reward, because what you will gain from that practice is mastery of that transition of your voice. And whether you choose to belt or use voce piana in testa or sing with a very kind of lovely, lush head voicey tone quality, or use falsetto, or all of the above, having the flexibility to do all those different colors expands your artistic palette in just so many different ways. And so I hope that this helps. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments. My name is Jeff. Take really good care of your voices, enjoy singing, and hopefully we'll see you again. Bye.